Well, a question about Gandhi. You see, as we said, much water has flown since Ambedkar-Gandhi debate. Gandhi today, don't you think that is not such a powerful live presence in national life or in our own consciousness as, for example, Ambedkar is? He may be father of the nation and an international icon, but the ground on which he stood and the ground on which these debates took place has really disappeared. The center itself has shifted so much rightwards that the ruling set, the ruling classes today do not really need Gandhi to justify the status quo. In the era of these changes, globalization, and these strong communal mobilizations that are going on, and the other social changes that have occurred, a kind of a state welfareism for a certain period of time, the rise of OBC politics, certain betterment in the conditions of bondage, etc. That today's society is at a stage where the main dangers are coming from different quarters and they are represented by different forces. Today, what we see as the forces of Hindu right, their ideas and their actions impinge more on the caste question than Gandhi's. So may I ask this question, why is so much focus on Gandhi?
Well, I think first of all, in terms of this introduction, if you look at it, it's again here I can quote you Ambedkar on the importance of why he chooses to reply only to Gandhi, even though there are many people who criticize his views, and he says he's the oracle of the Hindus. And so today, surely, he has shifted, he has lost relevance, and yet in other ways he's gained relevance. I watch the news, I read the news, and I see how often there are references to him. Even now, they are fighting over who killed Gandhi. If you read the caravan story about Swami Asimanand, who's proud of being in Golwalkar's brother's cell or something, but in his ashram, the boys were made to chant every day the Ekta mantra. Swami Asimanand, the person who's been accused of the Samjhauta Express blasts I'm talking about, who's a functionary of the RSS. And the boys in his ashram are made to chant the Ekta mantra, which includes Gandhi and Golwalkar. So was this an ideological killing? Was it a fratricidal killing? These are debates that at least these are questions that I have asked in this. But I think, what happens is that Gandhi is the mascot. And however far we move materially from Gandhi, we use him like, Catholics use confession to somehow give us, make a moral position. So the Indian government is busy right now trying to get Gandhi statues put up all over North America, for example, So I don't think that we can minimize the importance of Gandhi. Yet, when we're talking about how things have shifted, again, I think there's quite a long part in my essay about how caste works today. And the debates about some people saying, oh, globalization, urbanization, all these things have actually, neutralized caste. And others saying, no, but caste is very important because it doesn't atomize Indian society. No Dalits are saying this, but, others are. It has its buoyant supporters. Still, caste does. So I think that would be an answer to the question. If you just see how caste and capitalism and corporatism play out today, it's pretty shocking. Who owns the newspapers? Just look at those things. it's amazing, the ownership. We are all quite fond of talking about Dalit dispossession, Adivasis, what's happening, but for instance, nobody turns that gaze upwards. What are the Banyas up to? What are the Brahmins up to? Who is in the judiciary? Who is in the bureaucracy? It tells a deadly tale, when you look at it that way. When you just turn that searchlight away from the victims to the perpetrators, it tells another story.
Yeah, of course. But the question that starts worrying people inside Dalit movement itself, the people who are involved with Dalit studies, or anybody who is studying social exclusion, is the extent and this whole politics of assimilation, co-option. There are glaring instances of the co-option of Dalits, a section of Dalit masses, into communal mobilizations, into genocidal violence. And the other side is that there are a whole sector of Dalit thinkers who think globalization has been a boon, is good for Dalits. It will destroy caste by itself. The Macaulay is the Mahatma, along with Ambedkar. Now, this degree of co-option also worries me sometimes because they often find legitimacy within Ambedkar's ideas. At one point in the book you have written that Ambedkar's circumstances were such that he was a revolutionary rebel, but at the same time had to, keep his one foot in the establishment whenever occasion arose, which is a very true description of his state. But in the era of Kashiram, later Mayavati, and politicians like these, today's Dalit politics as it plays out on the ground, there is no ethical or political, what you call, censor, any inbuilt mechanism in the Ambedkarism in practice that stops Dalits from being part of these sometimes opportunistic and often thoroughly anti-democratic alliances. This is one question that will not go away very easily because we see it happening every day. So sometimes I wonder that as a thinker, as a philosopher, perhaps Ambedkar did not really think through his strategies. His assertion on immediate empowerment took away all his attention from the long-term consequences of this strategy.
See, I think this is a very complicated question to answer, but it doesn't apply just to Dalits, no, it applies to all of us. Because there are so many of us who are critics of capitalism, but we have to live in a capitalist society and we are not pure anti-capitalist because it's not possible to be. And all the more so, if you're a marginalized person, you don't have that choice of purity or being the pure revolutionary, just as much as you don't have the choice of being the pure victim. And I have written about that dual legacy that Ambedkar left, the person who was on the drafting committee of the Constitution, even though he himself was unhappy with many parts of the Constitution, and then the person who wrote the revolutionary and liberating Annihilation of Caste, and sometimes that legacy can be confusing. Then there's the other thing which comes, the question about parties, political parties like the BSP and Kanshiram, Mayavati. Now the thing is that I think the Pune Pact and how it looked at electoral representation and what Ambedkar was trying to say and how he was thwarted in that, even in his own political activity later, is a very, very interesting thing, because that what he was trying to say when he asked for the dual vote was that, look, even just demographically, the way Dalits are organized, you know, on the edges of villages and so on, they cannot form a political majority, you know. So he had worked out a system where they could have a double vote, where far from dividing things up, he was saying it would help them to be invested in the system, and yet if they could vote within their own electorate to form a political leadership. But now, you know, even Kanshiram and Mayawati, because of the way voting is structured, they cannot have a political majority without making alliances that anyway water down what they actually believe in. And in spite of that, you know, of course, there are allegations of corruption, but against them much more shrill than against others who are making much more money. But then Mayawati is a woman and a single woman and a Dalit, and so the shrillness of that allegation, the ugliness of it is sharpened, you know. But the fact is that they have done a lot to bring the idea of Dalit dignity into the mainstream. But for all of us, I mean, not just for Dalits, all of us are in a mess. You know, how do we make a revolution, or how do we understand the way things are and how do we act against them? How do we deal with the NGOization of politics? All of these are questions that apply to all of us. So I think I'd be cautious of only blame. I mean, when Dalit capitalism is celebrated, you know, just like I think there's no harm in them being capitalists. Maybe you could be a capitalist and not celebrate the idea of capitalism, but say that, look, this is how we have to survive here in this society now. We are not pure people. None of us are. I mean, for everything I say, I'm a writer whose books sell a lot, who has a bank account, who is not, you know, starving on the streets or not being, you know, I can be accused of all sorts of things, but looking, how do we live in our society? You know, how do we try to live with a modicum of integrity without being pure, you know, and pious and giving up everything and then becoming like a boutique item, you know?